Alright, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Scourge, since there was a stress test which allowed me to play with it. I couldn't play with it in PvP, only in PvE, but, you know, this is a good backdrop, because I've been doing a lot of thinking on how exactly the best way to set up Scourge, and I noticed some things I didn't actually think that I didn't cover during the beta weekend, but in the time since the PvP beta weekend, I've done a lot of theory crafting on it, and I realized there's some serious differences on Scourge that change how you build a Scourge that no one was really picking up on during the beta weekend, but I think it'll become very apparent once the game launches. Now, obviously, everything I say in this video is supposition. This is all based on paper theorycraft, since obviously I haven't been able to play this in PvP, so I haven't been able to test it. This is all just straight paper theorycraft. So you'll notice I'm using a dagger here. Now, what I'm doing here where I'm just stabbing enemy, you're probably not actually going to be doing that much in PvP, but you will probably be using a dagger. And the reason for that is a fundamental difference between how Scourge works with Life Force and how other classes, or how not other classes, how Reaper and regular Necromancer work with Life Force. So, now both Reaper and regular Necromancer, they use Shroud skills to DPS. And Scourge also uses its F skills to DPS. But the difference between Reaper and Scourge is that in Reaper, your Shroud skills don't cost you Life Force. Like, you just need the minimum amount of Life Force to get into Shroud and stay in Shroud for however long you need to do whatever skills you want to use. So if you want to do the 5-4 combo, you only need to be in Shroud for, you know, like 4 seconds or so. Do that combo. Now, obviously, if you're trying to tank some damage, you'll be in Shroud for longer, but that's not related to your damage. You don't actually need that much Life Force on Reaper to do DPS things. You're really, and the extra Life Force is just there as just, you know, a health buffer. It's not really offensively used. And because of that, there's not a direct relationship between your Life Force on Reaper and your DPS. You just have to meet a minimum threshold of Life Force to do your DPS. And then the rest of Life Force is just for defending yourself. Now, Scourge, you're spending Life Force to damage. You're spending Life Force to do things directly. Like, your F skills directly cost Life Force. Which means you actually need a ton more Life Force on Scourge to be using your skills compared to Reaper and regular Necromancer. Which means you have to be maxing out your Life Force gain at all times, because most of your damage is coming from your F skills, not your weapon skills. All your burst is actually coming completely out of your F skills. That's where all your burst is at. And because of that, you want the maximum Life Force generation. And that is why I'm using a dagger here and not a scepter, because scepter is the worst Necromancer weapon for generating Life Force. Which means it is the worst Necromancer weapon to be using if you want to be using your F skills as much as possible. Whereas Dagger is one of the best Necromancer weapon skills outside of Greatsword for generating Life Force quickly. And of course I don't have Greatsword on Scourge, so I'll be using Dagger. And that is why I'm using it, because Scepter, you cannot maintain F skill usage if you're using a Scepter a lot. So, I'm using Scepter Staff instead with Soul Marks, and this will probably be the best weapon set. I'm recording. This will probably be the best weapon set for Scourge just going into the expansion, because again, you need to have maximum Life Force that you didn't have those requirements on Reaper, but you will have them on Scourge. And because of that, having that dagger is going to be more important than Scepter, because you don't really care about Scepter's damage. Like, it just applies bleeding, which is trivial compared to what the F skills do. Now, of course, you probably noticed that Scourge is more of a kiting class, which is obvious to most people, and dagger isn't a good kiting weapon, but since Scourge is fairly low mobility, you're going to get meleeed by people that you won't be able to shake, so having a dagger that you can just quickly start gaining Life Force off them as long as they're close to you, and then using that Life Force to attack them with F skills will definitely be the better strategy than just trying to stay in Scepter and use that, even though Scepter is a better damage weapon compared to Dagger for a combi build. Now, you will, if you're not being directly meleeed in the face, probably be using staff most of the time, because again, you are going to be kiting and trying to use your shades as your damage application. But, as I said earlier, you don't have a lot of mobility. The melee classes will be able to close with you consistently, at which point you'll want to be in dagger and just getting the life force so you can get those F skills off to repel them. Another thing you'll notice on my build, this build is probably what I'll be using as Scourge, and what I'm expecting to be the meta setup for Scourge, is that I have consume conditions other than the punishment heal. Because the punishment heal doesn't have very high base healing, and the barrier it applies is very weak if you don't have a lot of healing power. Which you're not, because you're going to be running carrying, because you need to be stacking as much vitality as possible to make your life force management as easy as possible, because again, more vitality increases the size of your life force pool, which directly benefits your resource management. Now, consume conditions is also a better heal just in terms of its base healing compared to the punishment heal.
They'll have to hit much harder.
And I'm using Master of Corruptions, which I don't normally advocate, just to get the consume conditions healed down to 20 seconds, which is, I think I don't like the long cooldown. Usually I don't like the 30-second base, and having a faster heal up time is very good. And another thing that Scourge can do that other Necromancer spec is I can just tap the F2 all the time to convert the debuffs from corruption skills into boons, which means I can completely negate the two self-condis you get from every corruption skill just by using the F2. So, you know, I drop a Plague Lance, hit the F2, boom, those condis are gone, and they're now boons. Which means, in the case of Consume Condition, that blind that normally ruins your day, I can just immediately turn it into Fury and turn the vulnerability into Protection. Which makes Master of Corruption actually really beneficial, because you can actually use it to just constantly give yourself beneficial boons. Even if you're not fighting a class that's applying condis to you. I'm not actually doing a good job using my shades here. Another reason I'm using, you'll notice I'm also using Sand Savant here and not Demonic Lore, even though most people thought Demonic Lore was the way to go. Really, the burning you get from Demonic Lore is nothing compared to what you get from Doomfire. So it's not actually that good. And you'll actually be getting most of your bursts from burning and not Torment. So the extra Torment damage isn't that big of a deal. More importantly, what Sand Savant allows you to do is it makes managing shades so much easier than they are when you only have the 3 shades. Because the problem with the 3 shades is the way the charge mechanics work. In a combat situation where you constantly have to reposition shades, if you're using 3 shades, you won't be able to maintain more than 1, maybe 2 shades at a time. You'll never have 3 shades out. If you're running 3 shades and you put 3 shades out, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, because you won't be able to move those shades around much because of the charge mechanic on Manifest Sand Shade. But with Sand Savant, you never have to worry about that charge mechanic, because you only need to put 1 out to get full benefits, and you get this larger area, which makes hitting targets and affecting foes a lot easier. And it also, I think, gives you a reduced cooldown on your charge generation. Yes. Okay. Which means, yeah. So when you're using Manifest Sand Shade, you pretty much never have to worry about your charges. I mean, obviously, if you spam it really quick, wow, I can't talk, like I did there, you'll use it charges, but even then, it's already back, and that was with me constantly bringing out a new shade just on cooldown. In a more realistic situation where you're only dropping a shade, you know, once every maybe 4 seconds or so, maybe 5 or 6 seconds, you're never going to have to worry about your charges with Sand Savant, whereas you are going to have to worry about your charges with any of the other Grandmaster traits. What is this? Veteran Magic Metal. Oh, it's the Hero Challenge. Another benefit of Sand Savant is both of your minors give you a bonus based on how many shades you have out, and the larger shade counts as 3 every time. So just dropping 1 shade, you get full benefits of both your minors, so that's whatever 75 expertise times 3 is worth of expertise. Yeah, that's good math. And then The most important miner's blood is as sand, which is you gain 5% damage reduction for every shade, which on sand spot means you get 5% damage reduction for dropping a shade, or 5% times 3, so 15% damage reduction just for putting one of these big shades out, whereas normally if you're running the 3 shade setup, you would have to put all 3 shades out to get that 15% damage reduction. And since in a realistic situation, you're probably never going to have more than 1 shade out, regardless of what Grandmaster you're running, Sand Savant or Demonic Lore. But Sand Savant gives you that 15%, whereas a Demonic Lore setup will only have like 5 to 10% at most. That damage reduction is gonna go a long way, along with that expertise. It also gives
I'm returning to my bottle.
the first miner. It also gives concentration. I have no idea why they're giving a concentration bonus. I guess for the might I give out. There's no real point to that. Like, I don't actually understand what benefit I'm getting from the concentration, but I'm getting expertise from it, so I'm getting Condi duration, which is nice for having 3 shades out. And that's plus 75 on that trait. If you're not familiar with this trait, it's plus 75 per. So with 3, it's 75 times 3 expertise per shade, which on Sand Savant that would count as 3. So my duration is, oh goodness, where'd it go? Yeah, 312 right now. Or 20%. So that's pretty good.
I feel good.
And then of course 15% damage reduction from Blood of Sand, which is also good. And that's another important function of this, as I've been saying. And of course it's easier to land. The affecting a bigger area, you know, you drop it, it's a lot harder for them to get out, much bigger radius effect, etc, etc. Also it increases the hit limit of your shade up to 10, I think? Yes, to increase targets. So your shade will have a hit limit of 10, which means even if they've got like clones out and stuff, you don't have to worry about body blocking so much, because you're pretty much never going to have a situation where there's so many minions and stuff that they can body block your shade. And you, because also all of your effects come out from you. So that's why I'm running that. Again, you'll always have Doomfire, that's your big damage. Now that I'm running Soul Marks because you're going to be kiting with staff most of the time. It is interesting to note that Scourge is the one spec where Unyielding Blast may actually be really, really, really good. Because basically, let me find an enemy. Where's an enemy? I put Unyielding Blast on. I don't actually think that moves me faster, but okay. I put Unyielding Blast on it, and I'll come up to this. Actually, that has really low health. I'll come up to this big fat guy over here, and I push all the buttons, and then... Did he just evade all that? And then I can just stack a lot of vulnerability for creep. Now that's... and I'm low on life force now. And then see, the vulnerability goes up, particularly with the F5. Now with these, it's only 2 stacks of vuln for each of those activations, but if you're activating Desert Shroud, you know that's 2 stacks of vuln for every time Desert Shroud ticks. So you can basically, if you mash like 5 and 2 at the same time, you can easily get... And then see that the vulnerability is just ticking up. So I'm getting a lot of vulnerability really quickly, which can really help you and your team's damage. So Unyielding Blast may actually be useful on Scourge. Unfortunately, it applies ahead of your Doomfire, which means you cannot use Unyielding Blast as a cover condition for your burning. Although I guess you could argue that your burning is a cover condition for all that vulnerability. But, I mean, look at this, 25 stacks of vulnerability. Get wrecked. And I just fear him, and then get wrecked. And see this guy? Look, 14 stacks. So Unyielding Blast may actually be useful on Scourge. Now, since you're probably going to be kiting with staff a lot, you probably won't be using it. You're going to be using Soul Marks. But if you want to go like full glass Scourge, just all the damages, Unyielding Blast is the way to go. So there we go. We may have one spec that makes it worthwhile. But I think for general uses, you will still be using Skull Marks, because the way PvP is going to work for Scourge is you're going to be spending most of your time trying to, you know, stay at maximum range, way out here with a staff. and just try and kite people. But, you know, since, again, you are low mobility, people are going to get in your face. You've got your dagger, you know, so just go for bursty life force generation. Maybe land an MO so you can land hits.
Shield us by my will.
There's actually an interesting discussion on the forums right now about adding Kandis to main hand dagger. I've been advocating putting bleeds on necrotic stab and necrotic bite. That's your 2 and 3 on your auto chain, just to make it more worthwhile for Kandi builds and make it a hybrid weapon. They have been pushing hybrid damage with Path of Fire with their new stack combos like Reaver, which has a main and power and condition damage with minor and precision and ferocity. So that's actually something I would love to see, is like dagger applying some Kandis to make it something other than just a straight life force weapon for Kandi builds.
I'm bleeding.
Is there an eel stuck to me?
Don't let our pups escape.
Anything else I wanted to say about Scourge? Did I mention Master of Corruption? I remember if I talked about Master of Corruption. Oh, I'm using Carrion just because, you know, Vitality. I think I mentioned that earlier. And I'm not using Weakening Shroud because without the, you know, Death Perception and Shroud bonuses that you would normally get on a standard Kandi Reaper with going into Shroud, which actually allows you to make use of on-crit things via Death Perception, since Carrion doesn't give you crit. You don't have those, so on-crit effects don't really work. Oh, that's actually a problem, because... It's actually a really tough choice. I'm not sure. That's what's really annoying me, is like, I want Carrion with like precision instead of power, because that would make curses so much nicer. But I have this awkward problem where I can't really choose what I want to choose because I don't have precision. All I've got is target the weak. It may be worth taking intelligent sigils just for deterministic proccing of plague sending. That actually might be interesting to play with, is intelligent sigils, so, you know, you can just swap into a weapon, hit someone, and plague sending automatically goes off. I'll have to play with that.
Poor pups, but they'll get away otherwise.
You'll probably be using Nightmare Runes just for the Kandi duration. I'm using Scavenging on the demo just because they don't give us access to all the runes, and Scavenging is what was available. And, you know, Scavenging also isn't bad for a Carrion setup because it does convert Vitality into condition damage, so you're really bursty. Although, also, if you were trying to go really bursty, Berserker would actually be a better setup because that's more raw damage. Although Scavenging does give you extra life steals for more sustain, which you're really going to need, so there's that. But I think Nightmare may actually be the way to go just on launch for the Kandi duration. And it also gives you a Kandi transfer when you use an elite, which if you're using Plaguelands is nice because it'll transfer the self Kandis off immediately to anyone in the range. That's actually something I would want to talk about. I have been going back and forth on whether it's better to have Plaguelands or Ghastly Breach. Because if you're using untraded Ghastly Breach, which I am because I don't have enough punishment skills in my bar to justify taking the punishment trait over the corrupt conditions on dropping a trade. And I'll go into that a little bit. I end up with Plaguelands, since I have Master of Corruption, having an 87 cooldown, and Ghastly Breach having a 75.
They'll get away otherwise.
That's interesting, because, you know, that's actually close enough that there's a serious question of whether it's better to have Plaguelands or Ghastly Breach. Plaguelands is obviously a huge amount of raw damage. Ghastly Breach is a huge amount of Boon Hate. Now it's not Boon Corrupt, it's Boon Rip with addition of Torment and Cripple. So I guess you get a lot of Torment out of Ghastly Breach, but you get a lot of cover Kandis out of Plaguelands. Plaguelands is still going to be way higher damage. But Ghastly Breach also gives enemies slows and gives you might, so it's like buffing your team's damage. And then it's also, I think, applying burning on every single pulse. So actually, I don't know what's better. I think Plague Lands might be a little better. But hey, you never know. Just because Plague Lands is so much raw damage, like you put a Plague Lands down and it's like, good the enemy's never going to res anything. Just because of all that damage, but I don't know, that's actually going to be... I actually like that though, that there's a serious question is, I can't just look at these two skills and be like, which one's better? I don't know, it's going to depend on what you're doing and what the situation is. It's actually really cool. I love it when I have situations where I'm looking at two things and I'm like, I have no idea what I want. That's good. We need more things like this where you're like, I have no idea what I want. On utilities, these two, I mean, obviously, great things to have. You'll probably be using one utility punishment. The two punishment skills, Desiccate, I was using that a lot during the beta weekend just for the life force. I don't think on launch that'll actually be that good of a choice because you're going to be kiting or using dagger, so I don't think having the skill just for the life force, I guess it gives you might too, but it's meh. Serpent Siphon doesn't really give you, the barriers from that aren't that great, and it's just a really bad version of Boon, although it is very easy to land. Trail of Anguish is basically it. It's going to be between Sandswell and Trail of Anguish. It's going to be your utility. Sandswell's actually nice because it's even untraded, it's a 25-second break stun that also boon rips and applies burning to foes behind you, which is exciting. And then Sandswell, it's, you know, it's an escape. Now, it does boon rip foes, but you're not going to be using Sandswell to boon rip. You're it rips one boon. Like, that's just not something you're going to use the skill for. It's just going to be an escape skill. So it's basically between Sandswell and Trail of Anguish. Anyways. I'm using the torch thing here. I'm actually a little confused. I'm going to have to play around with how the life force management it is in live. I know this is really starved, so between Nourishing Rot and Abrasive... These miners are all nice. Like, I really can't decide which one I like more. Fell Beacon, though, is... that expertise bonus from condition damage is really nice, because it does give you a good amount of expertise without having to invest stats in it. Which, when combined with Sand Sage, can get you, you know, that 20% expertise you saw over here. Which is considerable, because if you combine that 20% with Nightmare Runes, you end up at 45% Condi duration to everything. Oh, I just wasted all my life up there. I didn't see all these guys coming in. Again, 5% life force, you know, that's 1,000. That's enough life force. Oh, well, it's not quite enough life force. It's almost enough life force to use Nefarious Favor just for ripping a boon. So I don't know. Nourishing Rot could be good. Abrasive Grit could also be good just for the Condi remove. I do love this. Like, there's so many interesting choices in this build, or this spec, just for
Time to do some real damage.
choices. Like, there's not clearly bad traits. I think the only trait that really comes across to me as bad is Desert Empowerment, just because the barrier's so hilariously tiny. I am using Unending Corruption just for the boon corruption on dropping shade, and that is a regular boon corrupt. It is not the convert to torment, so if you hit some instability with dropping a shade, you will fear them, which is nice. So then that's why I'm using it. And I just don't have enough punishment skills, particularly if I'm not using Ghastly Breach to really justify having the punishment trait. And this, I'm pretty sure, is about going to be what the setup is going to be right here. Although with carrying, since you don't have a lot of crit bonuses, it may be worth looking at other trait lines since a lot of this goes to waste. Except for Master of Corruptions, like I'm basically just taking curses for Master of Corruption. Now, if they change our life force generation to
You will
scale with the size of our life, or not the life force costs of these skills to scale with the size of our life force bar, which I hope they do, because that's really a change the spec needs. Going for something like Rabid would probably be better, and that would open up your options with curses, since that would give you base precision to make use of curses. And that's all I have to say. So I'm going to end the video here.